Welcome back to News and Views right here on Salon Media. My name is Salailo Makwidire, and we begin this morning with the latest and deeply alarming escalations in the Middle East. But with the focus being on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he has launched strikes against Iran in what he calls a preemptive move. But critics, both inside and outside of Israel, say this is not about national security. They argue it's about political survival. At home, Netanyahu is facing mass protests, deep public discontent, and a fracturing coalition. And abroad, his actions are dragging the region and potentially the world towards another devastating war. The question now that looms large is Benjamin Netanyahu deliberately prolonging war, not to protect Israelis in any way, but to protect his own grip on power? And joining us now is Professor Jeff Halper is the director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. He's coming to us live from Al-Quds. Prof, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure, and really looking forward to an insightful conversation.
All right, let's go.
We'll just jump right into it. Just looking at what's currently happening, over the last few days, Iran and Israel, and just the timing of this escalation, just as Netanyahu's coalition government is teetering on a collapse. There's been increasing calls for his resignation. Is it a fair assessment to say this is a script of a movie we've seen before? Benjamin Netanyahu, inciting war, inciting a crisis, just so he can grip power.
No, I don't think so, actually. I mean, that's a piece of it, obviously. He has his legal problems. He has his coalition, but his coalition is actually pretty stable. Just last week, his government survived the vote of no confidence in Parliament, and the opposition cannot call another vote for another 6 months. So he's got a good amount of time in which his government is stable no matter what happens. Now, he has to obviously mollify his right wing that doesn't want an end to the genocide in Gaza, obviously. But that also really isn't the issue. I think there's a bigger issue here, and I think it's a mistake to put everything on Netanyahu and his own personal problems and the coalition. I think there's a much bigger thing going on here. And that is that I think Israel, Netanyahu, say what you will about him, is very strategic. He's probably the most strategic politician that Israel has, and I would say one of the more strategic leaders in the world, even though I don't agree at all with his policies. And I think he's reading the map in the Middle East. And what he's seeing is this historic window of opportunity here. First of all, he has Trump in the White House, that's giving him absolute backing for anything he wants to do, including any kind of an attack as we're seeing in Iran. We're at the cusp of normalization. We've talked about that a lot. Zionist settler colonialism ends with normalization. If Trump and Netanyahu can complete the Abraham Accords and Saudi Arabia falls in, and Israel is normalized with the rest of the Arab world, with most of the Arab world, including its settlements, and we create really, literally an apartheid regime in Palestine, where the Palestinian people are pacified. And again, that's why I think Gaza is happening, and the Gazification of the West Bank as well. There's a pacification process going on because you can't complete the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia can't come in and normalize with Israel as long as there's fighting in Gaza and the West Bank. So that has to be ended, and the Palestinian resistance has to be broken forever. Then we've got a situation in which, look, you've got a couple competitors for hegemony in the Middle East. I think this really has to do with the wider Middle East here. Israel can't just rely on, this king or that president or whatever. Israel has to become, and it is, the regional hegemon. And it's sharing power here. It's a co-hegemon with Saudi Arabia today. Turkey would like to be a hegemon in the area, but it's not Arab, and it's. I think after Erdogan, it's going to be more marginalized. Um, Israel and Saudi Arabia are exactly on the same page. Saudi Arabia wants to be the economic hegemon. Israel wants to be the military hegemon. And being the military hegemon means then, again, to normalize is whole settler colonial enterprise. They win. The only other rival is Iran. But Iran is there's real issues between them and the Sunni world, the Shiite Muslims and the Sunnis. You've got the Houthis that are really harassing Saudi Arabia. And I think Saudi Arabia and the Sunnis are pretty happy, actually, with what Israel's doing. I don't think Israel can go so far as to destroy Iran, but certainly to neutralize it as a military rival, and as a claimant to hegemony in the area, which is trying to do, is fine for Saudi Arabia. So if Israel eliminating Iran as a real effective a contestant for hegemony in the Middle East leaves the whole Middle East to Israel and Saudi Arabia. Palestinians are lost. The whole thing is gone. There is no real a counter force that can stop them, and we have a new Middle East that's based on the military hegemony of Israel and the economic hegemony of a neoliberal Middle East that serves Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and really leaves the peoples of the Middle East poor, living in autocratic regimes. Your next item, I guess, is going to deal with the Egyptian violence towards the March on Gaza. I mean, these are not great regimes that are being left to run. And I think the Palestinian people, but written large, all the peoples of the Middle East are going to be living forever under this repressive Israeli military, Saudi run, repressive Arab regime kind of a situation. And that really is taking the Palestinian tragedy and enlarging it to a wider Middle East tragedy, in my view.
I want to zone in on the situation now, the story of the day, Iran. And I want to start with Netanyahu's own words. He claims 80% of Iranians would oust their own government if they had the chance. What do you make of this assertion, and how credible is it from your vantage point?
I don't know. Regime change was not intended originally as a part of the attack on Iran. And, I mean, I'm not obviously a fan of the Iranian Islamic regime. I don't know how important that is, that there is regime change. I think, I think he's talking about that to kind of give the attack a certain popularist, liberal patina. In other words, look, this is a good thing we're doing. We're liberating the people of Iran. We're getting conflicting messages, but some of the messages that seem to come through is, even though the Iranians obviously do want regime change, they don't want it to come from Israel. Maybe they don't want it to come from the outside at all. In other words, they see this as an attack on Iran, not an attack on the Islamic government of Iran. And, Israel more and more, and Israel always has a good strategy and then messes it up because it doesn't know when to stop. Now Israel is attacking civilian infrastructure, the televisions. It just neutralized all the ATM machines and the banks in Iran. It's beginning to attack the cities, and the people are suffering. People are dying. People are suffering, and that is not the way to even if there is regime change. I think the feeling that Israel is our enemy, that Israel is not a friend of the Iranian people, is going to be embedded. And so Israel, even though they could have created conditions for regime change, and maybe they have, that does not mean that when the regime does change, they're going to get a much more friendly government, because I think this is seen by Iranians as an attack on the Iranian people, not simply on the government. That's at least some of the things that's coming through.
And I want to zone in on that exact point. There's been a lot of, activists, Iranian democracy activists, who have said openly that this war with Israel does not help their cause. But it,
Right.
it almost, gives a opposite effect to what Benjamin Netanyahu might have intended. As you said, they might have a good strategy, but they never really know when to stop. Because it seems, although there was, disdain for the regime of the day in Iran, but after the attacks from Israel, there's almost a rallying, maybe not for the regime but for the flag and for the country, and that could prove counter productive from what was
Right.
intended by Benjamin Netanyahu.
Exactly. Look at the Arab Spring. I
Mm,
mean, Mubarak was overthrown, and then a couple of years later, you got a worse regime with Sisi. Just because you do regime change doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be for the better. And I don't know how strong the democratic forces are. I mean, Syria also is an open question. Um, so that the whole idea that if the Ayatollah regime falls, we're going to get a liberal democratic state, isn't necessarily the case. I mean, the Shah's son is now trying to worm his way into power in Iran as well. He's one of the most active voices. Well, the Shah's regime wasn't exactly, a liberal democratic regime. Israel and Israel is very involved, of course, in the Shah's regime. So Israel is seen as a longtime enemy of the Iranian people. From before the Ayatollah regime,
mm,
it was Israel that built the Savak, the Shah's secret police that was so repressive in Iran in those days. And Israel's, will come back. So that I think there's a real distinction to be made. When I say Israel has a hegemonic presence here, I mean among governments.
mm,
Israel is supports all the repressive regimes here, from Saudi Arabia to the Emirates to Egypt, and it would support a post Islamic Republic government in Iran. You know, Israel, is the supporter of repressive regimes. That's why it has so much support in the world. But it does not have the support of the Arab or Muslim street, as you're saying. The
mm,
people, the people see what's happening. The people do not want to live under repressive regimes, and they certainly don't see Israel with its genocidal relations with the Palestinians, destroying the Palestinian people as somehow the liberators and the good faith liberators of the Arab people. They know that Israel doesn't care about the Arab people, that it only cares about itself, and that it's in league with all the governments that are their enemies as well. So I think we're going to have to find a way. The real problem here is that it's so repressive in the entire Middle East with the help of Israel, because Israel supplies the security, the surveillance, the technologies of repression. It's so repressive that the progressive forces in the region can't really organize and become a political force. There are, you could see it in the Arab Spring and what happened to Tunisia and what happened in Syria and all over, what's happening in Iran with the different uprisings against the regime all over. The people want democracy. The peoples
mm,
of the Middle East want freedom, but they want freedom from their own governments. They want freedom from Israel, and Israel is one of the major factors, and that's why it has that hegemonic status here. It's the main factor in keeping these repressive regimes so strong that they're able to repress all the progressive forces that otherwise would be better able to overthrow them.
Let's talk capabilities here. Can a country like Israel at this point, which is already embroiled in a brutal war in a lot of fronts, but Gaza being the most notable, sustain another front in Iran? What does this strategic logic or maybe illusion
Mm.
here? And also Iran itself, looking at how they've responded, looking at their capabilities, and this war seemingly unraveling. Looking at the two countries, what's your assessment when it comes to capabilities and ultimately the end game?
Well, this is what some Israeli military people are warning Netanyahu. Again, this problem of not knowing when to stop. In other words, Israel is capable of degrading the Iranian military capacity, of really degrading its ballistic missile system that it's doing, certainly degrading its nuclear program that it's doing, even though there's no sign that Iran is building an atomic bomb, a nuclear bomb. There's no sign of that. They said they're not, but that's another story. But they are degrading that. So Israel can, in a way, either neutralize or degrade Iran's military capacity and therefore its political clout in the region. It can do that. But now, as they're talking, now they're going on to regime change. Now they're going on to attacking the civilian infrastructure. You see, they have such control today over Iran that they can do anything they want to, and Israel always overplays its hand. And Iran is not going to be defeated, not by the United States and not by Israel. It's a strong country. It has allies, as in Russia, for example, and China. It's a part of the BRICS, like South Africa, part of the BRICS bloc. It has economic resources. It still has a 1 million-man army. In other words, you could create a situation where you've degraded certain capabilities of Iran, but it's able to recover in certain ways, find other ways of exerting pressure. And in fact, you're right. You've opened up a new permanent front, whereas Iran was sort of far away and you weren't the focus. Now you become the focus because you're Iran's major enemy, Israel. And so I think there's military leaders that are saying, enough. We should stop where we are, not drag the United States in. Because once the United States is in, this really becomes much more of what Trump himself calls a forever war. And then Israel's in trouble, because then the whole Middle East becomes embroiled in this conflict and it gets out of control. So the question is, in the next day or two, is Netanyahu going to be smart enough to take his winnings and go home, or is he going to overplay his hand? And that could really lead to an escalation that who knows where that's going to go. It won't go to a good place, and it wouldn't be good for Israel's interests either, bad as they are.
Prof, I want us to take a short, quick break, but when we come back, I want us to focus on the United States of America. You touched on it a bit, just their factor, their involvement in this. Donald Trump, when he was, vying for the presidential seat, he was going on the no wars card, and it seems like he'll be dragged into another war in the Middle East, and there's a whole debate in the United States and in the MAGA spaces about whether or not this should be a route that they take. But we'll touch on that after this.
Are your financial goals feeling out of reach? Yassin Badat Financial Advisory is here to turn your aspirations into achievements. Our dedicated team, armed with a history of success, is ready to guide you through the complex nature of financial and investment planning. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to the game, our personalized solutions cater to your unique goals and risk appetite. Trust in our commitment to transparency, integrity, and excellence. Ready to unlock a world of financial freedom? Partner with us today. Call Yassin Badat Financial Advisory at +27 33 346 2071 or visit www.yassinbadat.com. Yassin Badat Financial Advisory, guiding you to financial success.
Send food and send kindness to those who have lost their homes and have been plunged into poverty. For those who are a meal away from starvation, a food parcel means an entire family can eat this Ramadan. That's the power of food. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
You South African, of course. You anxious about the future. We've got you covered. Build on your wealth portfolio with Randry Jewelers Gold Coin Exchange. Visit us at 151 Stephen Dlamini Road, Musgrave, Durban, or call us on 031 202 4700 for more information. Randry Jewelers Gold Coin Exchange, your passport to gold investment.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities, your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Are you ready to witness the truth through the lens of war? Saturday, 21st June, join us for a public photo exhibition and documentary screening with world-renowned journalist, graffiti artist, and war photographer Bilal Khaled. Raised in Gaza's refugee camps, Bilal covered 300 days of genocide through photography that reveals the pain, the loss, and the resilience of his people. Lakewood Conference Centre, Monday, Johannesburg, Saturday at 6 p.m. Brought to you by Salam Media in partnership with Al Jazeera and Lakewood. Contact Ponti Moletsani at 081 569 9770 or email info@salammedia.com.
Our brothers and sisters in Palestine are enduring unimaginable hardships. Ashraful aid teams are on the ground, delivering crucial aid to those in need. But we can't do it alone. Palestine is suffering and they need your help. Your support can make a world of difference. Visit www.ashrafulaid.org today and donate to bring hope, relief, and healing to those who are in need.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views of myself, Salailo Makwidire, and we are continuing our discussion. Professor Jeff Halper, he's the director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. And as we zoom out from the war in Iran and Israel's military agenda to the broader international response, or maybe lack thereof, and at the center of it all is President Donald Trump, American president. He famously promised in January that under his leadership, America would stop all wars and bring a new spirit of unity to the world. 5 months on, that vision has not only failed to materialize, but some argue it's actively unraveling. Prof, thank you so much for staying with us. And before we went on that short break, we were, discussing the American element to it, and I want to pick up on it. Trump once positioned himself as the only person who could strike a deal with Iran. Now he's shifting, to saying sometimes they have to fight it out. Let's talk about the American element in this war, and ultimately what we could see happening when it comes to their involvement and the discussions in America about whether or not America should be, involving itself in another war in the Middle East, despite other adventures that have panned out not so unsavory for the U.S.
Well, it's a scary thing that the most powerful nation in the world is a wild card. It has no strategy. I mean, Trump has no strategy whatsoever. He doesn't know the issues. I don't think he ever heard of Iran before he became president. He doesn't care. He doesn't get position papers. He can't think analytically. He doesn't want to hear. He doesn't listen. And of course, he surrounded himself by yes men, by Trumpites, his own ideologues. So he doesn't really get any kind of critical or professional or analytical input into his decision making. So it's all off the cuff, and he can't resist being on the winning side. Everything for him is a win, whether it's a conversation between me and him, or the United States and China, whatever it is. Winning is the idea, in this very transactional way. Everything is transactional. It's all a deal. It's all winning. It's all, look what he said now to Iran. He went from wanting diplomacy, warning Israel, don't go in. I want a diplomatic solution, all of that, to yesterday, where he says unconditional surrender, to Iran. So he just gets sucked. He gets sucked with the flow. Netanyahu can manipulate him like a puppet. He thinks it's the other way around. A lot of people do, but Netanyahu is very good at manipulating him, especially because Netanyahu is a winner from the point of view of military and what's happening in Iran. So I think the United States could very well go in. I don't see any there. It's true, in the MAGA base, he's promised them America first, isolationism, not to get involved in forever wars, but he can't resist coming in. Yesterday, he sent out on his Truth Social media thing, we have now control over the skies of Iran. In other words, he's taking what Netanyahu did. It's true. It's American weapons, American planes, American ammunition, but they're Israeli pilots. It's the Israeli military that's doing it. Now, all of a sudden, we have control of the skies of Tehran. We demand unconditional surrender. So he's really not only taken on Netanyahu and this whole campaign against Iran, but now it's his campaign. And once it's his, I don't think he can give it. I don't think he can go back to any kind of diplomacy. So either Iran is going to surrender, basically, or I do see the United States getting militarily involved.
And that's a scary prospect, because my next question was definitely touching on that. What could we see unravel if that's the case? Where could we see this conflict get to? You mentioned that Iran has a big population. They're a big country. It's not necessarily a similar situation like in Gaza, where it's literally children and women that are bombed in tents. But this is a country with capabilities, and it has allies like Russia, like China, who have strongly condemned the actions of Israel. So when you have the United States, having, whether it's boots on the ground or actively being involved, whether it's with resources or intelligence, where could this ultimately lead to in true lived terms?
Yeah, it's hard to know. It's certainly going to escalate. It's going to be hard to put a cap on it and control it in any way or end it in any way. I don't know where the Muslim world's going to go. On the other hand, of course, on the one hand, much of the Sunni Muslim world doesn't like Iran and the regime, but on the other hand, this is a Muslim country and a Muslim area of the world, and this kind of a brutal intervention of a Western state to reassert hegemony over the Muslim world is something that might not be, that might ignite opposition way beyond Iran. Iran itself has been talking about raising a Muslim army. It's appealed to Pakistan. It's even talked to Turkey. You have Iraq involved, as well. I mean, Iran is much more than Iraq in terms of a military opponent, but Iraq is involved, and so yeah, and then Russia, China, and that now you begin to get into issues like oil, energy. What happens to oil prices in the world? How does that affect the world economy? So now this begins to go way beyond the Muslim world and Israel and Iran to become a real global matter. I don't know where it could. I mean, you don't know where it could end, and there's no force. Certainly, Trump. There's no force that will be capable of controlling it once it gets out of hand, because all the actors, Israel, Iran, the Sunni world, Russia, China, Trump, the market, I mean, they all have different interests, the Arab regimes, and everybody's in this whole chaos that Trump is famous for creating. In this whole chaos, I mean, you don't know what kinds of forces are going to emerge and what's going to happen. One thing you do know, it's not going to be good for the Arab and Muslim peoples of the world, certainly of this region. It's not going to be a good thing. And but you're right, there's a vacuum here. Europe isn't stepping into the vacuum. Africa isn't stepping into the vacuum. The global south. You can ask yourself, where are the BRICS countries in all of this? Where's Brazil? India. Okay, India is a supporter of Israel. You don't and very anti-Muslim. So we don't expect India to get involved with this. But where's China? Where is Russia? There's all kinds of countervailing forces that are out there that are simply being silent. And I can't really explain why. I don't know at what point they're going to see their interests really being threatened and are going to begin to step in. What stepping in means, whether it's diplomatic or whether it's economic or whether it's military. So, it's a very, very dangerous situation that we're in, and it's very hard to know. But we're going to know if the United States gets in, that changes the whole equation, I think.
No, definitely. And we're going to leave it on that note. Prof, thank you so much for always giving us your time. Really, really appreciated. And yeah, it is indeed scary and dangerous territory that we find ourselves in.
To be continued.
There we go. And that brings us to the end of our conversation. Professor Jeff Halper is the director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions and a long-term analyst of Israel's role in the geopolitics of war and peace. So yeah, from Netanyahu's calls for regime change in Iran to Donald Trump's seemingly crumbling promises of global unity, I think it is clear we are not witnessing a march toward peace anytime soon, but a drift into deeper instability. And yeah, we'll be watching with a keen eye and looking at everything and anything that has to do with the world in and around you. We're going to take a quick break. News and Views continues after this.